What's up, AP people? We're going to be talking about chapters 1 and 2, just a quick review of some of the bigger ideas from the American Pageant textbook. Let's get started with chapter 1, New World Beginnings. Some of the reasons for European exploration to the New World or North America would have first of all been the European demand for more and cheaper products, primarily in the sense of foodstuffs. We're going to be talking about that later with the Columbian Exchange. Okay, let's keep going. There's also going to be a European demand in search of new routes to the eastern markets because the Ottomans had a monopoly on those trade routes. The three G's would be our last reason for European exploration of the New World, that being gold, glory, and the gospel. Now, the explorers wanted the first two, gold and glory. The missionaries, or the religious folk, they wanted to convert natives over to the gospel, in other words, the Bible. Here's a quick map from your textbook that identifies the location of the various Native American groups at the time of European contact. You need to be able to identify at least one Native American tribe. Now, this can be in the case of the Iroquois, which your book in chapter 1 focuses on a lot of, or the Cahokia people located in and around here, the Mississippi Valley area. In other words, the mound builders. Okay, we'll do more work in class on these groups, but you need to know at least one group. There's two just to get you started. Let's talk the effects of exploration. Most notably, going to be the rise of a slave trade for the sugar plantations in the West Indies. Another effect of exploration is going to be the spread of disease. In the text Guns, Germs, and Steel, they're going to make the claim that at least 90% of the Native American population of the New World is going to be killed due to disease. Now, there are going to be some conflicting claims also as an effect of this exploration, primarily between Spain and Portugal. These two countries are going to claim the same area based on similar explorations. The first piece we're going to talk about is called the Papal Line of Demarcation. This is going to come in 1493. This is a year after Columbus's discovery of the New World for Europe. In this papal line, Pope Alexander VI is going to divide the quote-unquote New World between Spain and Portugal. The Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494 is going to give most of this New World in the Americas, except Brazil, over to Spain. So here we have Pope Alexander VI line in 1493. It's going to divide between Portugal on the right and Spain on the left. 1 year later, the Treaty of Tordesillas is going to give a little bit more Brazil over to Portugal, but most of the New World claims are going to go to Spain. The Columbian Exchange, probably the biggest takeaway from chapter 1 for you in the American Pageant book, is going to be defined as a dramatically widespread exchange of animal, plants, culture, including slaves, diseases, and ideas between the Eastern and Western hemispheres, or the Old and New World. The effects of this Columbian Exchange are going to be cultural diffusion, or the spread of cultures and ideas, people, so on and so forth, that's going to change the two worlds forever. So here's a really good image for you visual learners, to understand what is being exchanged coming from Europe or the Old World, including Africa and Asia, and products going from North America or the New World back to those same locations. Okay, pick out a couple of these. Make sure you memorize a couple of these. Make sure you understand the impact of the Columbian Exchange. That is the biggest part from chapter 1. Now, we're going to talk about Spain building an empire here in the New World. The first thing that we're going to focus on is something called the encomienda system. This is going to allow the government to, quote unquote, commend or give Indians and land to certain colonists in return for the promise to try to Christianize them. It was basically slavery, folks. Here's an image that's going to come from your book that focuses on some of these European explorers coming to the New World to essentially enslave or take as property both the land and the people here in the New World. We're also going to focus on something called the quote-unquote Black Legend. This is defined as this false concept that's going to hold that the conquerors merely tortured and killed the Indians, stole their gold, infected them with smallpox, and left little but misery behind. This is somewhat true. However, the Spaniards, or the conquerors, they also grafted a culture, laws, religion, and language into native societies that was based on their own Spanish culture. And essentially, this is going to lay the foundation for the modern day Spanish speaking nations of the world. The Spanish also incorporated indigenous culture with their own, rather than isolating and shunning the Indians as the English did. We're going to see this later in some of the subsequent chapters to come. In other words, the Spanish, unlike the English, intermarried with the Native American peoples. And again, that's an important concept and takeaway that you're going to need to know and remember over the course of the year. Chapter 2, entitled Planting of English America. Let's get going here. England is going to emerge later on after the Spanish Armada is defeated. England emerges as the sole naval power in the world. They're also going to bring a Protestant nation to the forefront. Remember, Spain was Catholic, and so when you think back to that papal line of demarcation in the Treaty of Tordesillas from 1493 and 1494, we must remember that Spain, as a result of those two agreements, had a significant holding on the New World. This is the point at which it's going to begin to change, okay? So this is a turning point in history. A couple of the characteristics of the English Empire are going to be seen in the different types of colonies that they established. The first one is going to be called a charter. Now, these are chartered trading companies made up of stockholders who shared both the profits and the losses of the colonies. This is also going to be known as a joint stock company. One example of a charter colony is going to be called Virginia. A second type of colony is going to be called a proprietorship. All right, this is going to be a royal grant of land to some of the king's favorites or the royals' favorites. So an example of this would be Maryland in the case of Lord Baltimore. We're going to be covering Maryland in depth a little bit later. A royal colony is going to be ruled by the Crown of England or the King of England, in this case, Georgia. Now, the Chesapeake Bay in particular, this is going to be made up of Virginia and Maryland. You're going to need to know this. Now, indentured servants are going to be considered the early labor source of these two colonies or this area known as Chesapeake Bay up until Bacon's Rebellion. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. John Rolfe is going to be the main historical figure here in Jamestown who introduces tobacco and basically saves the colony. They had a representative form of self-government. Back in 1619, it's going to be called the House of Burgesses. This is going to be the earliest form of self-government. This is going to be important later on as we look at tracing the development of self-government here in the English colonies. The Powhatan Confederacy. This is going to be made up of a neighboring Native American tribe. They're going to fall victim to the 3 Ds. In other words, disease, disorganization, and disposability. They were easy to get rid of at this particular time. Maryland and Virginia, some key terms. Before we get into these, can you remember what type of colony Virginia was? That's right. It was a charter or a joint stock company. Remember, the stockholders of these types of companies both share in the profits and the losses of these particular types of colonies. Another term you're going to need to be aware of in this Chesapeake Bay or Maryland and Virginia colony territory is going to be called primogeniture. Now, there are certain laws set up that allowed or decreed only the eldest sons to be eligible to inherit landed estates. Now, this is set up back in England. Others, meaning second or third born or even women, are going to be forced to seek their fortunes elsewhere. In other words, in the New World. Maryland. What type of colony are we talking about with Maryland? Can you remember? That's right. We're going to be talking about a proprietorship. In other words, Lord Baltimore is going to be the head of this particular colony. Now, in Maryland, we're going to see the acts of toleration. Basically, what this is going to do is going to guarantee religious toleration to all Christians only. Any type of Jewish figure or any type of other figure is not going to be tolerated in Maryland. In this particular area, we're also going to see the rise and the importance of what we call indentured servants. These are going to be defined as Europeans that are going to agree to work for a period of 5 to 7 years in the New World in exchange for passage to America. So in other words, they're going to agree to work for these people for a period of time between 5 to 7 years. Let's go over to Georgia for just a second. Do you remember what type of colony Georgia was considered? That's right, it's going to be a royal colony. Now, Georgia is going to be the last of the original 13 colonies formed in 1733, originally as a buffer between the aristocratic South Carolina and Spanish Florida, as well as French Louisiana territories. This was also an early penal colony for debtors. So, in other words, if you were a debtor or you owed money, you would be sent to Georgia. So, at this particular time in your textbook, here we have the original 13 colonies and a map of those 13 colonies. In Georgia, we're going to have a significant leader named James Oglethorpe. He's going to become the leading statesman who's going to help repel a lot of these early Spanish attacks. Later in 1750, Georgia is going to adopt something called the plantation system, which is going to be modeled after South Carolina's plantation system. So at this particular point, we have early signs of slavery, primarily in the South, between Georgia and South Carolina. Up around Maryland and Virginia, remember, we're going to have indentured servants. And so this is a nice distinguishing moment for you in your notes to note the differences in early slave systems. That's it, folks, for chapters 1 and 2. I hope you get off to a good start. I hope you review your notes. Please visit the class wiki or apushreview.com for other resources, other videos, and or notes. Help spread the word. If you got any questions, comments, or other ideas for Mr. Serbo, feel free to email me. Thanks, folks. Have a great day.